Welcome to the lecture on Introduction to Depreciation and Depletion. So, in this lecture we are going to have the overview about depreciation, which is a very important aspect when we study the economy, especially about the assets which are used, its values are basically assessed. So, in that process we need to understand the depreciation, its meaning, its types, then that is also required for many a times the tax calculation purposes, many a times we take the tax rebate. So, for these things depreciation is very important topic to be studied. Now, let us start with the introduction of depreciation. So, any physical object with the passage of time it will lose its value, and that is what is known as the depreciation. So, anything we use as the time progresses its value will certainly be less, and the amount by which or any parameter by which we measure the change in its value. So, that quantity is known as depreciation. Now, for depreciation to be defined, we must have certain requirements, and the requirement is that the product which we are talking about, for which we are talking about the depreciation, that must be used in business to help you to produce income. So, then it must be something that wears out, decays, obsolete, or from natural causes. So, basically the object which we are using, if it is physical object which is in function by being in mating with the parts or by being used in machines, then certainly it will wear out because of the contact, or even if it is not used, it is kept in the open, then it will be certainly rusted, or its function will be certainly functionally it will not be that much effective or that much productive as it is when it is purchased. So, certainly that there may be something that wearing out, then it may decay over the period of time, or many a times the material may be obsolete as the period because of the technological advances, because of the change in the required type of demand or requirements. Many a times the product does not have the same demand as it has to be. So, it's because of many a times because of the type of needs, or maybe emotional requirements, or the technological upgradation at the same time in other assets or so. The requirement is that for the property to be depreciable, that it must be something which should be wearing out, it should decay, it should be obsolete, or maybe from natural causes. Then it must have a determinable useful life longer than 1 year. So, it must have certain time, so that you have to compute what is the depreciation. So, for that it must have a determinable useful life, and that must be longer than 1 year. Now, the depreciation types that include physical, functional, and accidents. So, when we talk about the physical depreciation, then we talk about different cases, like we talk about the pipes which are corroded, then the timber which is there, which will be rotten as you keep it in the atmosphere, then it will be rotten. Then there may be chemical decomposition, then you may have the bacterial action on the material. So, all these things they are basically bringing that physical wear and tear and damage. And also if the material is subjected to shock, vibration, then you have abrasion, impact. All these things they induce the kind of depreciation that is known as physical depreciation. So, basically in that it is visible that physically there is loss to the material. So, material it may be eroded, it may lose certain of its weight, or it may lose its appearance, or the mating parts because of the friction, and so it may lose its property for which it is intended to be. So, these are the types of depreciation which is known as the physical depreciation. Then you come to the functional depreciation. Now, functional depreciation means its ability to serve the intended purpose. So, when we talk about the functional depreciation, so if you talk about so we talk about physical depreciation, and so in that you have wear and tear, shock, vibration, and all that. So, because of that you will have, because of the mating parts, it will not serve the purpose as it should be. Then you have functional depreciation, and functional depreciation is because of the asset's ability to serve its intended purpose. So, because of deterioration in asset's ability to serve its intended purpose. So, many a times because of the change in demand, or the service which it can render, many a times the things become obsolete. Like you purchased a lathe, and then that lathe had the capacity to do the turning of 100 pieces per hour, but you require 1000 pieces per hour. So, now that lathe is of no use for you, so its value is decreased. So, all these things because of the upgradation in technologically or so. So, because of that or because of the presence of more efficient machines, the asset is said to be depreciated. So, it may be because of reasons like because of discovery of another asset which is superior and economical. So, because of the so that will make the existing asset obsolete. So, that may be the reason, or it may be also because of the inadequacy to meet the demand. So, as we discussed that there are two reasons basically. One is that at the same time you have another asset which has come into the market, which is technologically superior and also economical. So, that makes this present asset devalued. Second thing is that you are not able to meet the demand. So, you have another asset which is there by which you can meet the demand. So, that way also there may be the depreciation being arise. So, these are the different types of depreciation. This is the depreciation type. Now, so as we discussed that physical depreciation will be resulting in physical impairment, and we already discussed that it is due to action of elements including corrosion of pipe by bacterial action, wear and tear. So, many things there are two things. One is that one will be independent of use, whether you use or not certain things will depreciate, because like pipes, if you are using or not using. If you are not even using and you are keeping it in the open, it may corrode. So, even if you are not using, it is depreciating. And some of the things which is constantly in use, so because of the wear and tear or because of its constant use, that will depreciate. So, these are the physical depreciation, and functional depreciation, as we discussed, is because of obsolescence or it is because of inadequacy or ability to meet the demand. Now, when we talk about the depreciation, then we must know that what are the properties which are going to be depreciated, and before that we must be defining the property. What are the properties? So, basically properties are of normally two types, one is tangible and another is intangible. So, tangible means it can be seen or touched. So, it can be depreciated due to reasons which have been listed. So, whatever machines are there, because of the physical depreciation, they can be they can be depreciated. Intangible means something which has value, but which we cannot touch it, which cannot be seen, like software, trademark, patent, copyright. So, these are this is how the properties are differentiated or classified, and there is depreciation to both tangible as well as intangible property. There may be personal property, there may be buildings or real property. Then properties temporarily attached to buildings, you have many things like that. So, this way you have different types of properties, and land also is there, but land is not said to be depreciable because its value is not decreasing with time. Now, we will talk about certain terminologies, and one of the terminology is the value time function and book value. Now, when we talk about depreciation, basically this depreciation is also used in accounting purposes. While we claim depreciation, we get the income tax benefit on depreciation. That is why depreciation is important when we calculate the tax amount to be paid when we purchase any instrument. For any investment company will purchase instruments, and then there are certain rebate which is given to them. The depreciated amount, basically certainly there will be provisions for getting the rebate on that. So, that is how this depreciation is basically useful for the financial institutions. Now, once the material will depreciate, in that case there has to be change in its value. So, as the time progresses and if there is depreciation, then the value will be decreasing, and this will be represented by a function, and that function is known as the value time function. So, value of assets as it will be changing with time, and then book value is used to represent the undepreciated value of an asset. So, when the asset is purchased, it will be purchased at certain cost, and that cost is known as the first cost of the asset. Then as the time progresses, there will be depreciation, and that depreciation is to be quantified, and there are many methods that we will discuss in our coming lectures. So, once there will be depreciation, means the present cost of the asset or original value of the asset, it is going on decreasing. So, at any time when the depreciation amount is to be subtracted from the original value, suppose we are calculating yearly. So, at the end of first year, your value which is now of the object will be the original value minus depreciation in the first year, and that basically is known as the book value. So, we talk about this term, we standardly in a standard manner we talk about the book value, and book value indicates it will be representing the undepreciated value of the asset. It is calculated as first cost of asset minus the depreciation charge accumulated till that period. So, that way book value is normally used, and if you try to refer to the standard book values which is used, then there is a book value function, and that is a value time function, and how this value time function is basically presented. So, this is known as value time function. So, suppose any asset is there which has a certain first cost. So, if P is the first cost of the asset, and then if your F is basically the salvage value, final salvage value. So, that is your of asset. Now, P, so total depreciation will be P minus F. Now, what happens that normally your asset has certain present cost. So, you purchased in some amount P. So, that is your first cost, and then it may depreciate slowly with time. So, your time will be, so this will be your time in years, and this is your value. So, what will happen that as the time progresses 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, as the time progresses its value will be changing. So, initially its value is here, and at the end of 5 years its value will be here, and this value will be basically F. Now, P minus F is basically the change in its value, and this is the total depreciated amount which is for this asset. So, what happens that during that year, if this is a defined graph. So, you can go and just see that this value will be, so at this point this is the value of the asset. So, this is known as the book value at the end of first year, and similarly a book value at the end of second year will be this much, like that. So, this function which is which talks about the value and time, that is known as the value time function. So, here in the standard manner we talk about the book value, and this BT is known as book value at the end of year T. So, this is your BT, and similarly DT, DT will be called as the depreciation value. So, this is what is happening during that, what amount of depreciation is there during that year. So, this is known as depreciation charge during year T. So, this is your depreciation charge dt, and in this case we talk also about the estimated life of the asset. So, what happens that if you know the estimated life of the asset, then the book value at the end of estimated life of the asset is known as the F, that is your final salvage value of the asset, and basically this graph will be behaving in a different manner. It may be going linearly, it may go in a different way. The depreciation which is occurring during the different years may be different. So, that way the depreciation amount is calculated, and for that there is a standard formula. So, what happens that if you take in the standard way, the book value at the end of year T will be nothing but book value at the end of year T minus 1 minus dt. So, this is how the book value is defined at the end of any year t, and if you say, then in that case B1 will be B0 minus D1. So, similarly B2 will be B1 minus D1, like that, D2 something like. So, depending upon as you go on changing this value, so you can get these values. Now, this BT minus 1 will be written as, so this is your T. Now, BT minus 1 can be written as BT minus 2 minus DT minus 1. So, like that this will be accumulated curve. Now, if you take so as now in this case you have B naught will be equal to P, because book value at the end of year 0 it will be P, your first cost of the asset. So, that is your B naught. So, in that case if you see the formula, this BT will be P minus, and then ultimately your B naught will coming, and all that D terminologies D1, D, all that will be basically accumulated. So, it will be summation of j equal to 1 to T and dt. So, this is how your depreciation amount is calculated. This is book value at during the year t, at the end of year t is being calculated. So, this is the value time function and also the book value calculation. Now, for different our purpose is to find this book value at the end of any year or during any year. Our aim is to find the depreciation, so that the associated requirements of finding the change in value or the tax benefit or so can be calculated, and depending upon the function, this book value function, you will have depreciation amount differing. You may have the depreciation amount every year being same, that will be in the case of straight line function. Then you may have something by which it will be more in the initial periods and less in the final years, or there may be different cases. There may be rules for the n also, and there may be other rules. So, that we will see, and that is how this value time function and book value is defined. So, now we have to know about the different type of depreciation methods. Now, as we discussed that since there is a value time function, and depending upon the nature of this curve, you will have the different amount of depreciation during certain year. Now, there are if the slope is same, slope is constant of that line, then it is known as straight line method, which has particular slope, and in that case slope being the same, the depreciation amount will be same. So, that will be straight line method. Then apart from straight line method, you have accelerated methods. Accelerated methods means the depreciation amount will be more during the early periods, and then it will be decreasing as the time progresses, and that is basically very practically it can be thought of in reality, that when we take any material, its value is decreasing at a more pace initially, and then later on at lesser pace. So, that is known as accelerated method, and that basically the amount of depreciation is normally a function of its book value. So, book value, since it is decreasing, so it will be certain percentage of the book value. So, actually depending upon that, these accelerated methods, there are many accelerated methods. Basically we have declining balance method, and then we have the units of production, we have basically the sum of digits methods. There are many methods which talk about this, that the depreciation amount will be more in the early stages, and it will be decreasing as the time progresses. Then you have units of production method. So, that also is about how much is the production, depending upon that you have depreciation. So, that even you can be used for the depletion calculations, and we will talk about depletion later. Then you have tax depreciation methods, where we talked about you have many methods by which the tax calculation is done, and in that you have what we do is that we divide the assets into different categories, and basically you have a recovery period, and based on the recovery period the depreciation amount is calculated. And in that basically we have this is modified form of the accelerated method. So, that is why we also call it as modified accelerated cost recovery method. So, that is they are used in many countries for calculating this depreciation, and in that basically there are certain rules, there are certain conventions which are followed, like the convention is of half year convention, then you have a recovery period. So, depending upon the class of the material has a certain recovery period in which its cost is to be recovered. So, it will come in some like 5 year property or 3 year property or so, or 7 year property or so. So, in that 7 year property its all cost is to be recovered. So, in that case after 7 year its salvage value is 0. So, like that there are methods by which we calculate these depreciation by using those methods for such assets for tax calculation. Then next is the depletion. Now, depletion is also a kind of depreciation, but we talk about depletion when we deal with the depreciation of natural assets. So, the depletion is the capital investment in natural resources needs to be recovered when the natural resources are being removed and sold. So, normally when we deal with the use of natural resources, in that case when you are doing the capital investment, now in that case because once these natural resources are there, it will be over. So, they are not going to be further the presence of these resources. So, the process of amortizing this cost of natural resources in accounting period, it is known as the depletion. So, this is also a type of depreciation, and here also you have two methods of finding the depletion. One is cost method and another is the percentage method, and in that normally cost method is similar to the unit of production method, where depending upon how much you have taken out, what percentage of resources are being taken out, based on that you calculate these depreciation charges. Suppose it has 35 million tons of certain resources there, and you have taken 5 million tons. So, certainly you have taken 1/7 of it. So, certainly depreciation will be accordingly calculated. So, that way this depletion is calculated. Then you have percentage method also, and percentage method will be depending upon on every asset, type of asset, you have certain percentage to be depreciated, and then it is also seen depending upon the income tax, whatever you are having the net income which you are putting, or income tax which you are giving. Depending upon that, there are certain rules, like it should not be more than 50% of taxable income. So, on all these rules and also the percentage is defined for different types of materials, we calculate these depreciation amount in the case of depletion. So, this is how the depletion is calculated for the when we deal with the natural resources. So, this is what we know about, this is what we need to know about the depreciation and depletion. and we will talk about the different types of depreciation, how we calculate the book value, how we calculate the amount of depreciation in during particular year or book value at the end of particular year. All that needs to be known, or what will be the total amount of depreciation, or what should be the depreciation schedule. All that is required to be known, and that we will understand in the subsequent lectures, where we will talk about different types of depreciation methods like straight line method, declining balance method. Then you have the sum of digits method. You have other methods also, sinking fund methods. You have the depletion methods and all that. So that we will discuss in our subsequent lectures. Thank you very much.